Full disclosure and disclaimer, you are not comfortable doing what I'm about to do not do this. In order to remove this whole top half of the machine, there are certain cablings that are routed through up to the top of this machine that you need to disconnect. Do not do that if you are not comfortable with it. I don't recommend this process being done. However, for me and for my needs, I felt it was necessary. Okay, welcome back to the channel. I'm Joe, and if you're new here, think about subscribing. So let me set the stage for you. I live in Rhode Island, which is approximately 50 miles south of Boston, Massachusetts. I do have a very ambitious project ahead of me, and I've actually been putting it off for a while now. My workspace is insulated, but is not heated very well. And if I'm not careful when it's below freezing outside, it gets very frigid inside. Normally, it doesn't affect anything in my workshop. This is a woodworking shop after all. But I have one tool that is very sensitive to extreme temperature changes. This is a OMtech 100 watt CO2 laser. It becomes very challenging to operate it when it's extremely warm outside and muggy, and also extremely cold to the point of below freezing. So that's where the challenge comes in, especially if you're in an environment where you can't really control the temperature that much. There are two scenarios that can come out of this. One, it's below freezing outside, and the water that is used to chill the system, to cool the system, will freeze and inevitably ruin the tube. And two, if it's hot and muggy outside, a lot of humidity in the air will cause a lot of condensation within the system, causing, again, your tube to freak out and break down, or the wear and tear on some of the components of the machine. There's actually another consideration as well: dust. And that's one thing you want to avoid with CO2 lasers is, you don't want to get dust on the mirrors, you don't want to get dust on the components for premature breakdown, and also the overall care of the system. Now, I know there are certain measures that you can take to avoid some of these challenges. I mean, I know some people use antifreeze in their cooling system. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. I know some people use some sort of fish tank heater to heat up the water that's coming out of your chiller to cool down your tube. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole either. So my thought process is to just take this out of the equation, take the workspace out of the equation, right? So what I'm thinking is I'm going to move this unit downstairs of my house, and well, it's climate controlled and it's somewhat heated in the wintertime and very cool in the summertime. And it's dust free down there. So one challenge with that: I don't have access from the outside in, meaning I don't have a separate entrance going downstairs. I don't have a bulkhead to give me easy access to my downstairs. So what that means is I have to somehow get this unit into my house, of my living space, down the basement stairs. And oh, by the way, here's another challenge. Those basement stairs, it's not a straight shot. It goes down and then turns at approximately a 45-degree angle. My only option is to take this thing completely apart, bring it down into manageable pieces where I can get it downstairs of my house. That's the only option. Or I could just leave it here. My thought process is, if I can eliminate this, and I'll go through the whole system in a minute with you, but if I can eliminate this and bring it downstairs, that solves a number of my problems, right? And also, it gives me more space in my shop for more tools. There is the laser. Again, it's a 100 watt CO2 laser. It's fairly decent in size. So I have a CW5000 chiller. I have distilled water in there, and it circulates it through the laser tube. The exhaust that comes out of the laser, and I have an exhaust fan that you can't see it. It's actually behind the machine that pumps it out through the door. And on this side, I have a Fortress Ultra Quiet series compressor that I use for the air that comes out of the actual nozzle of the laser head. So as you can see, I have my work cut out for me. And again, I'm fairly confident in my mechanical ability, but there are always those moments where something goes wrong, so wrong, that you can't recover from it. And that's my biggest concern with this move. It's gonna be a learning curve as I'm trying to take it apart, and I'm gonna take you along for the journey. Let's do it. Fingers crossed.
Alright, so I repositioned myself and I'm just trying to come up with a game plan actually. Trying to remove some of the easy things like the hoses and air regulator system. I'll just remove that first and I'll just move the air compressor out of the way. And also my control board for the exhaust fan. It's just held on there by Velcro. I'll just remove that just to kind of clear away some of the cabling and remove some of the USB cables and Ethernet cables and just kind of coil them back a little bit just to get them out of the way so I can actually move the machine out from the wall, which shouldn't be too difficult. It's on wheels. Just an FYI, I did disconnect the main power going to this unit last night. That was easy enough. Today was 42 degrees outside. Tomorrow's going to be 68 degrees. Why am I doing this? Okay, making some headway. What I found is there are 4 bolts holding the base on, 2 of which are inside the electronics cabinet. So there's one right there. There's 1 and 2, and on the other side there's 2 as well. Alright, there you go. Alright, got it. So this is a little interesting. So we all know with these machines, when they arrive to your house, the hose clamps aren't the best. So you need to get rid of those plastic little hose clamps and put proper clamps on it, because this bolt was right below those hose clamps and it's rusted out. So go through your machine, make sure you put the proper hose clamps on it. Let's see how heavy this thing really is without the stand. It's still pretty heavy. Alright, so this honeycomb is held in place with 2 little nuts and bolts. One over there, as you can see, and one over there. But after you remove the bolts, it just slides forward like this to remove it. And it reveals that you have some, looks like very mild steel slats underneath it that will come off as well. So I'm going to do that now. I did remove the inlet and outlet tubes from the chiller itself. And I'm simply just going to blow in one end, and water should come out the other end, and I'll just dump it back into the chiller for now. Alright, so like I said, it is the next day and I decided to get rid of all the water in the system and for now put it back into the chiller, but I most likely will be replacing that water when I set everything back up. So what I'm going to do now is take off that shroud and to reveal the tube, and then make my disconnects and remove the tube from the unit. And so that's the plan right now. So we're at that moment now where I have the tube effectively detached from the machine. Took the tubes off, made the disconnects with the cabling, took off the security collars. So that tube is in a very sensitive state right now. So what I did was, I have a moving blanket, which is very cushiony, already set up on the machine, and I'm going to effectively, very gently move it out to the right to get it out of the opening of the machine, and lift it and put it on top of that moving blanket, and then I will wrap it up and secure that wrap with some painter's tape, and then move it to an area where I know it's going to be safe and secure. Okay, so what I also did off camera was I started removing some of the doors. They're just held in by these spring actuated clips, and relatively easy to remove. Just trying to shave off some weight. That's all I'm trying to do, shave the weight off. By me actually taking this apart, partial disassembly, I think I'm making the right decision, because you wouldn't believe all the dust that's in this unit. Between the cobwebs, the sawdust, and just, you know, everything else is making its way inside this cabinet. So I'm glad that I'm doing this because it makes me realize that I am making the right decision. Anything CO2 laser that involves mirrors and high power should not be in a woodworking shop unless you have it totally separated and in a closed area that's dust free, because I do clean the mirrors occasionally, but once you clean the mirrors, dust seems to just settle on those surfaces. And even though I do keep the unit covered up when I'm not using it, dust just seems to get in there. So I'm glad I'm doing this. I'm making the right decision, and it'll prolong the use in life of my machine.
All right, to spare you with the arduous details and painful details of moving that unit downstairs, movie magic, it's done. And the new location is right here. So this is the downstairs back room. That doesn't get much use outside of maybe a hanging punching bag, heavy bag. And there's a window, and there's a window on this side as well, and a window in that room as well for the exhaust. Nice and dry, climate controlled. This is the view from the opposite wall. I do use it for workspace, and this will be like my secondary workshop, an extension of my workshop, if you will. And as you can see through this window opening, I have some pre-made cutting boards, work area, and in that room I do have a little drill press, a small Delta bandsaw, and some other miscellaneous tools, but don't worry about that. That's all insulation that I need to put up. So I'm going to get started by taking off all the packing tape that I put on there, because let me just cut to the staircase I had to come down with this guy, because even though I broke it apart into 3 pieces, so this is the staircase that I had to come down. As you can see, there's an extreme right angle. Right at the bottom, I had to take this banister off. And all the way up there. All right, so yes, I made some provisions for the move. I packed everything up, stabilized all the moving pieces using painter's tape to hold the lid down. And I suppose I probably could have taken the lid off, but that whole top half is very light, so that was manageable. The bottom portion, the legs with the casters, that was manageable, but it was that area right there that was not manageable, because even though there was a lot of metal taken off of it, it was still pretty heavy and bulky. So keep that in mind if you plan on moving this unit inside your house and downstairs where there's limited access. So, but it was manageable. So now the fun begins in putting everything together. And like I said earlier, I labeled all the cabling, all the harnesses, some of the individual cables, wires that I had to disconnect from the connectors. Everything's labeled, so I will put everything back together and check and recheck and check again to make sure everything is wired up properly. There are some things that I could have avoided, just because I didn't know. Some wiring harnesses that did not need to be disconnected because they were routed in a certain way that I couldn't remove some of the, like the top piece, like the controller right there. I didn't have to take the controller out, but I did because I needed to get access to the emergency switch to disconnect those cables. So I just removed, there was only 2 bolts just to remove the controller control panel out of the way. So I'll just pop that back in when I'm ready. But let me go and unpack everything, and I'll probably have a time lapse because it'll take me a while to figure shit out. All right, I have all 4 bolts secured on each corner of the base. All right, next step is to secure the top back on, which is consists of 6 bolts. Again, around the corners. These are a little bit more challenging because they're in tight areas. So you have to use various different types of Allen wrenches to actually get in there. The smaller ones seem to work best with my big hands. All right, machine is turned on. The tube is on standby, but there's power going to it. Chiller's on. Water is currently running through the tube. No leaks. I think it's time to start finalizing my checklist and do the final assembly. All right, so that about does it for this video. It was kind of long. So it's done. It's set up in its final area. I just have to run the exhaust up to that window. I have to cut a hole in it and run some tubing outside. I might consider also a filter box as well, I'm not sure. And I ran some initial local tests on the machine. I'd still need to connect my PC to it. So follow along, because I'm actually going to build out this workspace. It's actually going to be an extension of my other workshop, and this will be the clean environment where I can laser cut in my pajamas. So follow along and subscribe, and I will see you next time.